Test, 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 test. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jim Pliner, and it is so good to see you all. I know that we're recording this for folks that couldn't attend tonight. I'm the principal here, and back in January of 2018, many of you sat in these same seats, and I probably welcomed you back then as well when you had 8th graders who were transitioning to high school. And that night, we said to you, our number one priority is to make certain that every student has a plan when they leave us, and they've got a sense for what comes next in that process. And on a regular year, on a normal year, we would stand here and talk about what has changed over the last 4 years and how the last 4 years or the last 18 months have been like no other. And your students have come through an amazing amount of change in a relatively short time, and it feels so good to be back in person with students, even with the safety protocols that are in place. And tonight, we are here to give you a little bit more of that support. That each step along the way, things change a bit. And now we want to answer some of your questions about how to support you in what comes next for your student. And then a little later in the presentation, we'll have a financial aid session as well. And when I think back to January of 2018 about what has changed, there have been a bunch of changes. We've got our wonderful counseling team up here that I'll introduce you to, but that night only Missy Tracy and Janelle Tom Schneider was with us at that point presenting. My associate principal team, I've got 3 folks that I'll introduce here in a minute, and none of those 3 were in their current roles back at that point in time, but all of these people that we've added to the team over the course of time share the very highest commitment to supporting students in to the fullest extent, and helping you find what comes next after Oregon High School is the highest priority for us today and every day that follows. So without much further ado, I'm going to introduce you. We're organized a little bit by neighborhoods, and I'm going to have to go readers here. That's one of the downsides of being one of the most experienced people here. And since we've been wearing masks, kids will say, "Good morning, Mr. Pliner." Wait, Mr. Pliner or Mr. Ashmore? Because with our masks, Mr. Ashmore in the back and I apparently bear some close resemblance. I think it is our hairline, maybe. But our first neighborhood I'm going to introduce right now is Kelly Jurasevich and Maggie Zawicki. You go ahead and clap. I know you wanted to clap. They support students with the last name A through F and AVID. Maggie joined us from East High School, where she was an associate principal for the past 5 years, was a social worker in Madison, and is incredibly talented. Kelly joined, she's in her 4th year in the Oregon School District, was split between RCI and OMS, and then graduated to the high school and has just been a fantastic addition. So if you've got last name A through F or you're an AVID student and our AVID program is in year 4 and we'll have our first graduates this year, they will be supporting along the way. Next, names G through N. We've got Megan Studer and David Piavanetti. And David's over here and Megan's here. Megan joined us. She was a Monroe student and kind of lived in the Monroe community, but then she went to Texas and was in the Houston area and did some really amazing things in some larger school districts and schools there, and then wanted to get back to family, and so we're really pleased to have her join our team. David Piavanetti was from Brooklyn, New York originally, and David is the other Brooklyn, right? Not the other Brooklyn. David was a teacher in Middleton and came to McFarland to start his administrative career, and it was an associate there for 6 years, lives in the Oregon School District, and wanted to come experience being a part of this wonderful school district. So he is wonderful team. Again, G through N. And then O through Z. I've got Missy Tracy, who's one of our vet counselors from back that 2018 January day you were here, and Mr. Brad Ashmore. Brad joined us from Stoughton. He was a teacher in the Stoughton School District for a long time and a coach, and was an associate principal in Stoughton schools and at the high school. And Brad came to join us again in his home community. So many of us raise our kids here, and this is our school and our school district too. And we want the very same thing for your kids as we want for our very own. And then Missy Tracy. Missy was from Deerfield prior to, we probably maybe told you that 4 years ago, and I'm sure you remember. But she was a counselor in the Deerfield district and wanted to come join the Oregon School District. And so we're all committed. And then my neighborhood, Janelle Tome Schneider. Janelle is, she and I work together, and we serve students that are a part of Achieve or OASIS or alternatively placed students as well. And but the bottom line is customer service is the very top of the key. If you need anything from this moment on, contact your neighborhood team or just anybody, and we're gonna rally the troops and make sure that you have exactly what you need. I think I'm turning it over right now to you, Ms. Tracy. Thank you.
Yes,
and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Kleiner. Will you be my clicker? Thank you, Mr. Pleiner. I am Missy Tracy, formerly Han, same person, different name. My apologies. And the rest of our team that you have not yet met tonight, I'm sure you've met at some point in the last 4 years. We have Mr. Granberg, who's not here tonight. He is our school to career coordinator. So if students are taking college classes during the school day, or they are doing some form of school to work where they're working for part of their day and getting high school credit for it, they work with Mr. Granberg, so many of you may know him. And Ms. Olkey is a new addition to Student Services. She is one of our administrative assistants. So she's located right inside the Student Services door, and she can help with just about anything. And then, of course, Ms. Cannell is our go-to. Everybody goes to Ms. Cannell. She knows everything. So if there's ever a question that we don't know, we'll definitely go to Ms. Cannell, so she's amazing. Some more of our Student Services team, we have Ms. Jody Peter-Schmidt. She's our school psychologist. So she mainly works with our students that have 504 accommodation plans and individual education plans, IEPs. For students that don't know what that is, that means they probably don't have one. But if you ever have any questions about those two things, those are kind of her big ticket items. And then Miss Oscar is our mental health coordinator. And I believe we hired Miss Oscar a couple of years ago now. And that's mainly to help with the transition. So we have a lot of students, especially now with COVID, there's lots of anxiety and depression and just lots going on. I'm sure you guys have noticed that. So she helps with our transition whenever there's students that are maybe out for whatever medical reasons, whether physical, mental, and they're transitioning back to school. We want to make sure we have that transition as seamless as possible so that students aren't missing any more work than they need to, trying to keep on top of the schoolwork while they're out and balancing that. So we have Miss Oscar who helps us with that piece. Miss Mitchell is our school social worker, and new this year, she's actually full-time here at the high school. She was at the middle school and the high school. She's been split in the past, but now we have her full-time. So if students need help with any sort of resources, if there's any home insecurities, homeless students, food insecurities, if students need any resources from food, clothing, help with driver's ed, whatever it is, we can use Miss Mitchell as one of our awesome resources. Miss Pleiner is our social emotional learning coach. And she helps a lot with our Panther Connections and our Character Strong program that we are weaving into our weekly activities here at the high school, and just trying to tap into those universal lessons, teaching kids how to be responsible and respectful and awesome adults. And Ms. Kraker, this is a brand new position this year. She is our academic engagement specialist. So when we've kind of tapped out and we're like, this student is just not motivated, what else can we do? She's extremely creative, and she jumps right in and she helps us out. So we are so glad to have her on board this year. And then finally, Miss Schmidt. Miss Jennifer Schmidt is our online coordinator, and she oversees the entire district. So whenever students are taking classes that are online, that are not offered maybe here in the building, you will see her name. She helps out a lot with the online classes. And then just a quick review of the graduation requirements. Our seniors have probably seen this more times than they want to know, but at this point, come senior year, most seniors need 1 credit of English, and some seniors still need a half credit of Phi-Ed at this point. But for the most part, students have already met most of these requirements along the way. So English, 4 credits or 4 years. Math, 3 credits. Science, 3 credits. Social studies, 3 credits. Phi-Ed, 1.5 credits, so 3 complete semesters of Phi-Ed. Health was generally taken as a sophomore, so most seniors have already completed that requirement. And then 8 elective credits for a total of 23 credits. And if any students have any questions about those, us counselors are always looking at these numbers, and we're looking at each and every one of your transcripts, but we can always use additional eyes. So if you feel like you might be not meeting one of these requirements, or maybe you're missing a requirement that's not on your schedule, please let us know and make sure that we are aware of that. We hope we catch them all, but of course we want all of you guys walking across the stage in June, coming up very soon. And then a reminder, 40 hours of community service. So it's been a little bit more lax over the pandemic. Anything that students are not getting paid to do. So I know we have some students that maybe help with transportation, getting grandparents to medical appointments, or helping out with childcare, or helping with lawn work, housework. Anything that students are not getting paid to do, they're actually volunteering their time and not being compensated through money, that will count as community service at this point. And a lot of our students choose to do like math co-teaching. So if students really enjoy math, or any subject area for that matter, and they want to help out other students, they typically spend 1 semester being a teacher's cadet or a teacher's helper, assistant, and that will cover the 40 hours in 1 semester. So there's a couple ways to turn those hours in. We have an online Google Doc. Of course, COVID introduced us to so many virtual tools, and one of them is the Google Doc where you can turn in your service hours. Otherwise, of course, the old school paper forms are on the back table. You may have grabbed one on your way in, so you can go ahead and document those. Please don't wait until May to let us know that you still have 37 hours to do, because it happens every year. We'd really like you to just get those out of the way, and the sooner you get those out of the way, we promise we'll stop bugging you about it. Okay, what's next? Okay, and then this is just a sample transcript. Obviously, you can't see that very well, but the 2 boxes that we just like to point out to students. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Studer. That's fancy. Okay, so the GPA summary is the blue box. It's outlined in blue there, and that lets students know where they are as far as class rank, although Oregon High School doesn't technically rank, so when us counselors are filling out the college application piece, we can check that box that says we do not rank. We feel like it's kind of an unfair advantage to feel like you're number 87, even though you have a 3.9 or whatever, 3.5, whatever that is up there. So that's the cumulative GPA. So there's term GPAs each semester that you're here, and then all of those term GPAs are averaged into one number, which is your cumulative GPA. So that box is going to hold your cumulative GPA, or your overall high school GPA, as well as your class rank if you're interested. And then in the red box is the credit summary. So that's where you're going to see that you've attempted, completed, earned 4 credits of English, 3 credits of math, 3 credits of science, social studies, etc. And it will show you where your cumulative credits are as well. So for instance, I believe that's 28 is the cumulative credits on that transcript. So if students ever have questions about this, please do not hesitate to contact us so we can help answer any of those questions. And then parchment.com is where we order our transcripts, or where students will order their transcripts. A lot of times students will email us and say, hey, can you send my transcript to so-and-so, or UW-Madison, UW-La Crosse? And the universities really wanted to come through a third party to consider it official. So students need to log into parchment.com, they create an account, and then they choose which schools they would like us to release their transcript to. And I believe there's a fee, I don't know if we have it up there, it's about $4 now, $3.75, something like that, per transcript. And then you can also go in there and you can click the box that says, I want my final transcript sent to this school, this school, this school. And then those will be sent out at the end of June once you guys are done and out of here and have forgotten about us. Hopefully you come back to visit. But so we use the parchment.com for any transcript requests. But again, I know this probably feels like drinking out of a fire hose right now, so any questions that come up, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to explain or answer any questions.
Ms. Tracy. I have the privilege of talking to you all about college applications, and I know we're kind of in the heart of it right now. So it's a hot topic on many of our kids' minds, and we just cannot encourage you enough to reach out to us with any questions. We really welcome them. We really love helping with that process. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions with college applications. If you take a look up here, this is kind of an application checklist. So I'm going to go through it with you. These are the main pieces that you're going to need throughout this process. And we know it can be a bit daunting. It feels like a lot. So my one piece of advice is to just take it one step at a time. And as you finish one thing, you can come to us with another question or then move on to the next piece. So if you take a look here, there are a couple different ways to apply with the actual application. Many of you are finding that. If you have started, you can apply directly through the college, university, tech school program that you're applying to next year. Or some students have discovered if you are applying to multiple schools, you can use a form called Common Application, or you'll hear us say Common App. And this is where you can complete one application if your university uses it, and you can apply to multiple schools so that you're not filling in 5 different applications, you're just filling in one. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit more, but it can be a little tricky to navigate that system. So please, please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions with Common App. If you are using Common App, one of the things that a lot of students don't realize is that your due date on your Common Application is the same due date as any of your recommenders. So let's say you're applying to UW-Madison and you want to make early admission deadline of November 1st. You submit everything on October 31st and you're doing great, you're right before deadline. But once you submit your pieces, then, for example, the counselors have a big piece. It's usually about 1 to 3 hours per student. We do an evaluation of you, academic review, extracurricular review. So you'll hear us ask for resumes from you so that we can do the very best job. We do an unofficial transcript upload, typically a letter of recommendation. And so if you submit it on October 31st, our due date is October 31st then too. So we just want to make sure we have enough time to do the very best job possible for each of you. I know I speak on behalf of all of us. We all love what we do and we want to be able to write you a really good recommendation. So the more time we have, the better. So that's college applications. Miss Tracy touched on transcripts, where you can get it. Quick question. Yep, so that's a great question. So the question is, can you put in the email addresses? First, I would recommend, thank you for bringing that up, I would recommend a personal email address because when you leave OHS, you may not have access to your Oregon or school email address. And then secondly, can you put in, if I'm your counselor, can you put in my email address? You will need to go in manually. I believe there's a button that says submit this, ask your counselor for this recommendation now. And one of the things, I know I speak for myself and the other counselors, please come talk to us, about it, because we'll want to talk to you about the process. Usually you come ask if you're willing to do a letter of recommendation and bring your resume so that we can do a really good job for you. And if you don't have a resume, that's totally normal. A lot of students don't have those. Some are working on them in senior seminar. There are brag sheets that you can also get to, where really we just want to know, what accomplishments, any accolades you have, any awards? Are you working a part-time job while going to school full-time? What are some of the highlights of your classes on campus so that we can really let this school know so that we can distinguish you as well? Good question, thank you. So parchment.com, as Ms. Tracy said, is where you'll request your transcript, and they're usually around $4 for an official transcript. If any of these links you get stuck on and you're like, oh, I can't remember this, in our junior, I know it's so hard to remember back to last year, it's kind of a blur, but in our junior conferences that we had with each student in here, we sent out a link sheet afterwards where it had all these parchment.com links and all these different links to all these things we're talking about, so you could also reference it there too. ACT, SAT scores. This is always a big question. I know all public, correct me if I'm wrong, right? All public universities and colleges in Wisconsin have said they're going to waive them for fall 2022 admission. So the question is, do you submit your ACT, SAT? And it's honestly a personal preference. Some private schools, from when I've looked at the list, say it's optional. Some say they still would like it. So you'll want to reach out to each of the schools and kind of see what their thought process is. If you decide not to submit, I am kind of telling my students this as well. Just make sure you contact the school and make sure you won't need them for any other purposes. Because I know I had a few situations last year where the student didn't submit, and they were right. They didn't need it for admission purposes, but then scholarships came around and they needed it for that purpose, or they needed it for placement purposes for enrollment after being admitted to. So just talk to the school, communicate with them to see where you guys stand for submitting them with the school you're looking at. Letters of recommendation, I touched on that one briefly already. I can speak on behalf of all of us, we love giving a great recommendation for our students, and I know they go a long way if you have a teacher that you've connected with, or even a community member to some extent as well. We do encourage students to try to give their recommenders, a week and a half, 2 weeks notice so that they can do the very best job possible. And I know for my students too, I always ask for a resume or a brag sheet just so I can make it personalized for you and really highlight what makes you unique with the schools. Essays and personal statements are huge and probably the most, oh, go ahead.
On those recommendation letters, can you talk briefly about the number? Is that stipulated or a good rule of thumb kind of stuff?
So that's a great question. Do you need to submit one, especially if they're not asking for one? And the answer to that is I would reach out to the school. I have dealt with schools before where they want, if they're not asking for them, they're not expecting them. But I've also dealt with schools where if they're not asking for them, they see it as like a bonus too. So it is dependent on the school. I know that's not a straightforward answer for you, but I hope that helps just a little bit. As far as the essay and personal statements, this is really where you can sell yourself, seniors. This is where you can really distinguish yourself, right? This is where you can talk about what makes you unique, why you want to go to that school, and be specific in it. Like not just, if you're talking about why you want to go to the school, why are you looking at this major in this school, or something that makes that school unique for you, and what do you plan to do with that? If you have some ideas, are always good. I always say definitely get somebody to proofread it, who you really trust, who can look it over for grammatical errors. And I have had some students reach out, always, they ask them, but even like a middle school English teacher, I've had students reach out to who they connected with, or another, former teacher of theirs. Of course, it's up to the teacher, but, to kind of proofread it and really look it over. Make copies of absolutely everything. I can't encourage that piece enough. And now it's really nice because so many things are digital, so you can make a digital file and copy PDFs, that sort of thing, upload it to Google. FAFSA, FAFSA is, for those of you who are kind of just doing this for the first time, FAFSA is any money from the federal government that you apply for in the form of loans, which is money you have to pay back, or grants, which is money that you don't have to pay back, typically based on your parent or guardian's income in most cases. There are some exceptions if students file independently, but that's kind of a different topic. But we are lucky enough tonight to have UW-Madison here. Our representative from UW-Madison is coming to talk to us about walking you through the FAFSA process. So even if you are not applying to UW-Madison, the FAFSA is all the same from the federal government. So it will benefit you just as much to hear them kind of walk you through that process, because it can be a bit overwhelming. And then lastly, application fees. Those are always big questions. So if you take a look at the next slide, you can see the public schools in Wisconsin, where they are at this year. And it's changed quite a bit this year since the pandemic, which is really nice for seniors, and I'm really happy about it. The UW system schools have a free application, with the exception of 3 schools, this year for when you guys are applying. The 2 schools that are charging still are $25 are UW La Crosse and Eau Claire, and then UW-Madison is $60. Now, of course, never do we want money to be a limiting factor, so if that's ever a situation, please come talk to us. We can talk about fee waivers, we can talk about even I've had some students interested in some private schools, and we've reached out to the schools directly and kind of give them a little background and saw if there were any other options for the students, because we definitely don't want that to be a limiting factor. So after you finish the application process in the fall, then spring semester rolls around, and you start hearing you've been accepted to a school, and scholarships come up. So there are different types of scholarships, right? There are national scholarships, and those can be found through search engines such as FastWeb. I will say, if I have one little piece of advice I always give my students, you should never have to pay for a scholarship search engine. If they're asking you to pay for it, please come see your school counselor, and let's take a closer look at what that scholarship search engine is. But FastWeb is an accredited one we've had students use in the past, and I'm pretty familiar with it. And those are the national scholarship search engines. There are also scholarships you can get directly from the college. And that kind of comes down to, a lot of students will ask me, there's merit-based scholarship based on academic performance and test scores sometimes. There are scholarships based on your FAFSA or the financial aid piece, how much you're eligible for. And so I know a lot of parents have asked me in the past, particularly, do I need to fill in the FAFSA? I'm not sure if I qualify or my child's going to qualify. And we do always encourage students to, because sometimes you'll need it for scholarships that you don't even know about. So those are kind of the financial aid office at your college. Often those are the scholarships that need them. And then the scholarships most of you have probably heard of are the local scholarships, right? So local scholarships are typically given out in February. And there used to be a paper copy if you had any siblings here. Now we go through connections class, your Panther Connections, and a link will be provided to them. Most students, for most of the local scholarships, you will fill in one application, and you will have, you can apply check to a variety of scholarships. There are a few that you have to fill in separate applications for. So those scholarships you would maybe write a separate essay for. But we've talked about, for students, I know it's very overwhelming to hear these terms for the first time. So you've got loans, money you have to pay back. You've got grants, money you don't have to pay back. And most of those are based on the FAFSA or typically parent income. There are also scholarships, which I always say are the best kind in my opinion, because it's like free money. You know, even if it takes you 5 hours to write the essay or 10 hours, but you get a big scholarship out of it, that's a pretty good hourly wage. So I always look at it kind of that way, and that seems to help my students when they come to my office and are like, oh, you know, this is overwhelming. So we know it is a lot though, and we're honestly here to help you. We all love what we do, so please, please come see us if you have any questions. And like I said, one step at a time as you go through this process, for sure. And now Ms. Tom Schneider is going to talk to you guys a little bit more about test scores.
Thank you, Ms. Studer. So I must have been doing something wrong in the department because they gave me the exciting test score portion of this presentation. Thanks, guys. All right, we're gonna move on because I know it gets to be a long evening. So requesting test scores, Ms. Studer touched on it a little bit for ACT. I know that obviously if you get a high ACT score, it's going to help you. So when you don't submit, sometimes schools are wondering, why didn't they submit their test score, okay? If you don't have a pretty high significant test score, then again, it's completely up to you. But as Ms. Studer said, if it is high, it can only help you if it's, in the upper percentile for that. It is confusing because all of our students take the ACT here at school, right? They've all taken it at least once here. Some students choose to take it multiple times. When you go in to request your test scores, the confusing part is when you say, have you registered for the ACT before? Some students are going to say, yes, I've registered because they've taken it at the high school. What they're meaning in that question specifically is, have you registered for an ACT account? So that would only be if you took it multiple times, not at school, because at school you take the paper pencil ACT. You don't register online for an account. So if you haven't done that before, that's the confusing question. So have you registered for the ACT before? Yes, that means you've taken it outside of school. If you say no, then it's going to say, have you taken it before? And you're like, yes, I took it at school. Okay, so the first one is always the tricky question that confuses students. Okay? Creating a new account, already have an account. So if you've already gone into the ACT, you've done this, you already have an account, then you can go in and use your ID and password. And we know how many times you go in and create passwords, so oftentimes you forget, right? You didn't write it down. You thought, of course I'm going to remember this password like we all do, and you forget. So there's always a place that you can recall your password. They don't give it to us. I mean, oftentimes it's difficult for us to find it, so it's better for you to go in and say, I don't remember it, get it yourself. Sometimes parents have created this. Has that ever happened? Right? Parents have set it up so you don't know the password that your parents set up for you. So again, you're going to have to find out your password, and it's difficult for us often to find. So that's ACT. Now AP scores. I am the AP coordinator here at the high school, and many students will take their tests in May, first 2 weeks in May. So many of you may have an AP course right now, and hopefully you'll sign up. Again, speaking of gambling for scholarships, it's $96 for the test. If you do well, oftentimes you get that credit for college, which is really a big bonus. When people say, how do I get scholarships? Take the AP test, because you may do really well on that, and then you don't have to take that course in college. So it is a real big advantage for you if you do well on that. So again, you have to go in and request your AP scores. They're not going to automatically send it for you. They want to know that you are giving permission for those AP scores to be sent. Your college will not automatically get those unless you request these. But you don't have to do this until the end when you've made your decision on what college you're going to attend. You don't want to send this to 8 schools that you've applied to. You only need to send it to the school that you make your final decision where you're going to attend. And again, hopefully you have the password. I cannot get this. Even as a coordinator, I cannot find your password. So you'll have to go in, contact them if you cannot get in and remember your password. Okay, unfortunately, I wish I could, but they don't even give it to us. All right, so that's AP test scores. And one fortunate thing, like we've talked about, they are doing more virtual things since we have been locked down. They're like, we have to get these resources out for people. So there are really amazing virtual fairs. If you don't have the time and resources to get to schools, I know I started really young with my sons because I knew I couldn't get to 20 schools between my junior and senior year, so we were fortunate. Whenever we traveled somewhere, I'm like, what schools are in this area, and let's check it out. And to be honest, my kids, they didn't mind it. They kind of thought it was fun to go to different campuses and see what was around. So there's virtual fairs, and even the Wisconsin Virtual Fair, I went on there, and there were 100 and, gosh, I'm not going to remember, like 150 schools that they have represented on the virtual fair, all from all over. So it's not just from Wisconsin. I was very pleasantly surprised. It's not just Wisconsin schools. So if you want to go to that, you register, and then they'll give you, I think I shifted the dates to the next one. So there's a couple virtual dates, and then they have in-person college fairs as well. Now those schools will be closer to the area, but you'd be surprised. Sometimes there are some schools from outside of the area that are regionally in the area for these, which is really fun to go and talk to some schools that you wouldn't have the opportunity to go and travel to. So the in-person ones are October 6th at Sun Prairie, which is a pretty large event, and then the Madison area is March 7th, 6 to 8. All right. Again, more things for national college fairs, and again, you can go in there. These are dates for, again, you can register for the national one, and again, those are going to be several schools from all over the country that you can go in and see. And if you can't make it to these virtual fairs, so many schools now are putting virtual things online, so if you're interested in, through our Zello, our career website that we use for our students, if you go on there, they'll have tours, they'll have students talking about it. It's just so many fun things now that they have online that we never had the opportunity to have when we didn't have all these things available. All right. I'm going to turn it over for resources.
Good evening. So again, I'm Kelly Jurasevich, or Miss J, as the students know me by. I am going to just walk through a couple different resources for you, and we will send this slideshow out as a digital copy to you all, as well as a recording of tonight later this week, so that you have access to be able to just click directly onto these links. Because as you'll see, we have a couple that don't show the actual website name. It is a direct link, so you'll be able to click right on those. So first and foremost, quick reminder, senior photos for the yearbook are due October 15th. If you have any specific questions about that, you can reach out to Ms. Kissling. We've included her email address for you. And then there is some submission information. It is a whole page that describes exactly what you need in terms of, what can be included in the picture, how it should look, all of those details. All right, so we're going to give just some brief information about Wisconsin-specific schools. And we're focusing primarily on Wisconsin because it is typically what a lot of our students end up applying to, but obviously we recognize there are a lot of different paths and different schools that students want to attend or want to apply, or even different paths that are not college-specific. And so please come connect with us if you want more resources on those pieces. So the Wisconsin Technical College System, they offer more than 500 different associate degree, technical diplomas, different certificates. And a lot of times I think when people hear technical college, they think Madison College, which is great, and it's a wonderful option. But there are also 16 other technical colleges throughout Wisconsin. So there are a lot of different options other than just Madison College. However, we do have a lot of students who do apply to Madison College, and so we have some free application dates that are coming up where the fee will be completely waived for you, and you can complete that application here at school with a Madison College representative. So it's a really great opportunity. So they will be here in the library or the LMC during 1st through 4th hour on October 27th, November 17th, December 8th, and February 16th. So that's a really great opportunity to be able to get help in filling that application out. It's a very simple application, and that fee is waived. Scholars of Promise is a program for low-income graduating high school students. That just gives an opportunity for them to access education without having to think about finances and having that be a barrier. If you want to learn more about that, please contact Madison College to apply, and they have a lot more information on their website as well. All right, the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, or I think WIAC, or WAICU. WAICU, thank you, I knew I was going to get that wrong. So it's an organization that's made up of 23 independent or private colleges and universities. And those are all in Wisconsin. And you can learn about all of the different colleges, their different financial aid packages, their programs, all of the different information on their website. It's actually really user-friendly, in my opinion, which is uncommon, I think, for colleges. And a lot of times students will feel like, oh, I can't afford a private college. You'd be surprised at their financial aid packages and what they have to offer. So we highly recommend taking a look at that and seeing what you can learn. The UW Help website is a really wonderful website for all of the UW system colleges, and there are 26 different campuses, including the 2-year branch campuses. Again, this website shares a lot of detailed information about each campus, admissions requirements. It talks about financial aid. It talks about, major programs, all of those types of things. There also is an app that students can download called UW Journey, and that's an app that they can answer a bunch of different questions and find a campus that is a best fit for them, which is pretty awesome. It also goes into looking into majors. It's called Major Mania, and there's just a lot of really cool resources, so you can find all of that information also through the UW Help website. Okay. I'm going to give a super brief introduction onto financial aid because we do have the UW-Madison reps here to go more in depth and in detail. But if you'd like to know more and get even deeper in terms of actually getting help in filling out the application, College Goal Wisconsin does offer different events where you can go and get assistance in filling that out. Their website is going to have all of the information that you need to take with you so that you have all of the material ready. There are in-person events and there are virtual events. You'll have to check out their website to find out exactly where the in-person ones are. They're typically in different schools throughout, Wisconsin. So you can find one that's close to you that works for your schedule, but also there are virtual events as well. And then FAFSA will open up on October 1st, so it is time to start filling that out. The faster or the quicker that you get that filled out, the more likely you are to get financial aid. And I'm not going to go in any more depth of that because we should have our reps kind of going into that now in a moment. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys so much for that is our portion, the counselor's portion. Like I said, we do have UW reps here who are going to talk to you more about the financial aid piece. And sometime this week, we will be sending out to you a recording. Thank you, Brady. One of our students is back there recording this for us, so we'll send that out. And then we're also going to send out the digital version of this slideshow. So when you see like UW Help, you can actually just click on that link and it should take you there as well. We are going to also try to upload a copy of this slideshow to our website as well. So UW FAFSA, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you. If you guys want to introduce yourself and kind of, do we have two of them?
Oh, there we go. Thanks for having us, everybody. My name is Carrie Temkin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the outreach coordinator in the Office of Student Financial Aid.
And good evening, everybody. My name is Molly Jo Bouch. I am one of the financial aid advisors at UW.
And before we get started, I just want to reiterate that just because we're here with the Office of Student Financial Aid at UW-Madison, everything that we're sharing today is applicable no matter where you're looking at going to school. There's some caveats to that, and we'll make it very clear when we're talking about UW-Madison specific things, but we'll also couch it in questions that you can be asking other institutions as well. Also, we're pretty informal, so if you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. We'll get those answered, and we'll have some time at the end as well. We do have handouts that we didn't put out before you all got here, but if you would want handouts, we'll be in the back afterward as well.
Yeah, as you guys walk out, you can grab some. But yeah, so we're gonna liven up the night. So talk about all the fun stuff. Talk about the money. But first, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we stand on. So I'm gonna read our land acknowledgement. So the University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Dijop since time immemorial. Sorry, excuse me. In 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to secede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly, but unsuccessfully, sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. All right, so first things first, FAFSA. It is the free application for federal student aid. So free is one of the F's, it's in the name. Some of the things that you're gonna need when filling out your FAFSA is you're gonna need the student information, you're also gonna need your parents' information. You also need your school codes to the specific institutions that you're interested in applying to. And then in order to receive financial aid every year, you have to fill out the FAFSA every year. So making sure that you mark your calendar for October 1st of the next 4 years that you're going to be in college or be in school. They made it super, super easy and super accessible, so you can access it from your phone as well as the web browser. So if you really wanted to, you could pull it out on your phone right now and start working on it. But this is kind of what it looks like. So kind of making it user-friendly.
And it's just as secure as the website as well, and you can go back and forth between using the app and using the website as well. One user, like the parent, could use the app and the student could use the website and just go back and forth. So it's really versatile that way as well.
Yeah. So the FAFSA is a little bit different than a CSS profile. Not a lot of schools in Wisconsin. I think there's only about 2 that use the CSS profile.
Northland College and Lawrence use the CSS profile. So if you have questions about that, ask those schools about the CSS profile.
UW-Madison does not use that. So as was mentioned earlier, the FAFSA was available October 1st, so last Friday. And you can go to FAFSA.gov to access it. It'll auto-direct to student aid. At UW-Madison, we have a priority deadline of December 1st, so that you can get the most financial aid possible. So there's different institutions that have different priority deadlines, so making sure you connect with those institutions' financial aid office to see if they have a priority deadline and see, making sure that you meet those deadlines. Also, when completing the FAFSA, they use prior year tax information, as well as, and then every other information that you enter in the FAFSA is kind of like a snapshot in time of right now. So thinking about that, what prior tax information means. So seniors who are in, high school students who are in their senior year and want to start college in the fall of 2022, will fill out the FAFSA this October, and then they'll use their tax information from 2020. So sophomores or juniors will be using tax information from 2021 to attend school in 2023. So some of the things that, when filling out the FAFSA, some things that you need to know or you need to have is your student and parent information when filling it out. Each of you will be will be creating an FSA ID. So in order to create an FSA ID, each of you will have your own email address, your full name, your birthday, as well as your social security number.
Something I want to just add about the FSA ID, it's so important that the parent creates their own and the student creates their own. That's one hiccup that we see down the road. If a parent is doing everything or a student's doing everything, it's easy to switch them up. And most things on the FAFSA we can fix. We can go in, we can edit it, you can edit it. But anything associated with the social security number, like the FSA ID, is really hard to fix. So take good care when you're creating those.
Yeah, and write down your password and username, because you'll be using it every year. It's just going to be your same login. It's how you sign the FAFSA electronically as well. So like I said before, you'll need your federal tax returns, W-2s, and other records of money earned. So making sure that you'll have that readily available. They do have the IRS data retrieval tool available for you to kind of import things. Sometimes it doesn't always work. It's a computer. Sometimes there's hiccups where you're unable to use that. And so it's always nice to have just paper copies or things on hand in case you need to fill it out manually. You'll also need bank statements and records of investments because you'll be including that on the FAFSA as well as records of untaxed income. So kind of like a whole snapshot of your financial portfolio.
And it is just easier if you have all the information in front of you so you can sit down and do it in one setting, but there is a save functionality of the FAFSA too. So if you're running into hiccups or you don't know how to answer something, you can always save it and come back later. All right, so some tips and tricks and frequently asked questions as you're filling out the FAFSA. The first has to do with that FSA ID, which, by the way, you can create now if you haven't already before filling out your FAFSA. And something to note, this is already mentioned earlier, but you're not going to have access to your Oregon High School email address later on, even into graduate school when you're still using your FSA ID. So use a personal email address when you're creating it. Same goes for parents. Parents, don't use your work email address because, hey, that could change too, right? We had mentioned that you need a social security number to create your FSA ID. Students do need to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen to fill out the FAFSA, but parents do not. So if there's a situation where a parent is not a U.S. citizen, they can enter in all zeros when it asks for that information. It also means that they won't be able to create an FSA ID. So in a situation where a parent is not a U.S. citizen, you are going to have to print it out, physically sign it, and mail it in. But other than that, everything is the same. A big question we get asked a lot is, well, what if my parents are divorced? Who do I use on the FAFSA? And the answer to that right now is whatever parent you've lived with the most in the last 12 months. Whatever parent you've lived with the most in the last 12 months is the parent that you use on the FAFSA. If everything is split right down the middle, like 50-50, exactly 50-50 in terms of placement, well, there's 365 days in a year. Are you really splitting that in half? But another thing to look at then is, assuming everything is equal in terms of placement, then you would use whatever parent has provided the most financial support for you in the last 12 months. If whatever parent is used on the FAFSA has remarried, then you also use that step-parent information on the FAFSA. So I just want to reiterate that who you use on the FAFSA has nothing to do with who claims that student on the taxes. It's a completely separate process. All right, here's another question. This actually happened to me as an undergraduate student. I went to UW-Madison. I was a first-generation college student. My parents were not in a circumstance where they could support me financially. And my dad was so mad that I needed his tax information. He just didn't get it. So a question that comes up a lot, like for me, was, well, if parents aren't or can't provide financial support, do you still need their information on the FAFSA? And the answer to that is, per federal regulation, yes, except in some caveat situations. A student can apply for the FAFSA independently if they're over the age of 24, if they're married, if they have a child that they provide more than 50% of the support for, if they're an active military service member, or a veteran, or if they were orphaned after the age of 13. There are also some other circumstances where we'd really want this student to be working closely with the financial aid office in circumstances where the student might be homeless, or it would be impossible or unsafe for them to get parental information, like in circumstances of abandonment or domestic violence or abuse, or cases of parents being in prison. So in those circumstances, we're happy to work with students to claim themselves as independent. Another question that comes up a lot is, well, we have a 529 college savings plan for our student. How does that show up on the FAFSA? The Wisconsin version of the 529 is EdVest. Perhaps you're not familiar with 529, but you know about EdVest. If, and this is the most typical situation, if a parent owns that 529 and the student is the beneficiary or the child is the beneficiary, then that shows up on the parent's investments on the FAFSA. That's it. Parents' investments on the FAFSA. You do not have to account for any disbursements from that 529 account. It only shows up as investments. In the other cases where somebody else owns the 529, like a grandparent, for instance, or the parent who's not in a divorce situation, the parent that's not on the FAFSA, if they own the 529, then it doesn't show up as investments, but rather a year later, the student has to claim those disbursements as untaxed income. Okay. Molly Jo had mentioned the IRS data retrieval tool. This can be your very best friend. It basically gives permission, you give the FAFSA permission to suck your information right from the IRS and spit it into the FAFSA. And there are a lot of reasons to do that. First, it means that there's just much less that you have to actually fill out yourself. So it goes way faster, it's smoother, there's less room for human error, and you're less likely to be flagged for a process called verification. The federal government flags about a little less than a third of all FAFSAs for verification, just meaning that you have to provide extra documentation to prove that what you put on the FAFSA is accurate. If you happen to get flagged for verification, don't freak out. It's just extra steps to take care of. But if you use the IRS data retrieval tool, you're just less likely to be flagged for that process. Molly Jo mentioned that it can be a little persnickety. It's very sensitive to how you put in your information. So that's another good reason to have your tax information in front of you, because if the IRS knows that you live on Main Street and on your IRS information, it's STREET, and you type in ST dot, that could be the thing that doesn't allow you to use it. If you've tried 3 times and you're not able to get in, you're automatically locked out for a 24-hour period. So just pay attention to that. And also I invite you to breathe if it's spinning in circles, and don't smash your computer. It's okay, it's okay. Also, if you've ever been a victim of identity theft, for obvious reasons, you won't be able to use that tool either. Okay, hey, it's a federal website that's being used by hundreds of thousands of families across the nation, all right around the same time, like right now. Right now, it's like just really busy. So if you find yourself going to the same page over and over and over again, or it's just not doing what you think it should be doing, again, don't smash your computer, breathe, save it, come back the next day. The federal student aid folks hear about those glitches, and they're actually really quick at fixing them. Also, that's a good reason to not wait until the priority deadline or the day before the priority deadline of the school that's your top choice to fill out the FAFSA, because there could be some tech issues that are just simply out of your control. So plan ahead. I've used the chat function literally 3 times already this week working with students and families. There's a little question mark bubble next to all of the entry points that provides additional information about what it's asking for. Definitely use that if you have a question. And then if you're still unclear of where to find the information or how it applies to you, go to the Contact Us section and use the live chat agent. They have really late hours. I think they're open until 10 Eastern. And just really helpful. They can pull up your information, see what you're seeing, and answer your specific questions. Another question we get a lot, particularly in a continual pandemic, is, well, what if my financial circumstances are different when I start school than it was a year ago when I filled out the FAFSA? Or what if my financial circumstances are different than what my taxes say they were 2 years ago? Those are circumstances where you can reach out individually to your financial aid office or the financial aid offices of the schools that you get accepted to and appeal. We're always happy to reassess the financial circumstances based on income or job loss, death in the family, but good stuff too, like retirements and marriages, any big changes financially or life event-wise, we're happy to reassess. Okay, so I was looking at some memes, GIFs and stuff, and they all sucked. Like, they were all just, the FAFSA is evil, burn it down. Like this one. Until now, right? Because you're here, you're learning about it, you're getting all the information, and I just want to give another shout out to College Goal Wisconsin. Do check it out. You get entered to win a scholarship drawing, and if you have questions, there's experts there to answer them. There's College Goal all at the Madison schools too. La Follette, I think, is probably the closest one to here. So check out that website and get help with the FAFSA. So after you file, digitally you'll get a student aid report. It's basically the receipt that you get after you fill out the FAFSA, and there's some really important information that you receive pretty quickly after you fill it out. And that includes your expected family contribution. I'm just gonna lay down the foundation right now. We're going to dive into this more deeply, but do not think that your expected family contribution is what you will have to pay to go to school, because it's not. In most circumstances, it's not. Next up, you'll also learn your basic eligibility for federal financial aid, including things like the Pell Grant. And that's important to note because some schools have particular financial aid programs for Pell Grant eligible students, so pay attention to that. You'll also see at that point if you've been flagged for that verification process. If you have been, even though it's identified from the federal level, it is a process that you have to go through individually by every school that you were accepted to in order to get a financial aid offer. It's a little cumbersome. Make yourself an Excel spreadsheet, keep track of who's asking for what and what you've turned in. But the good news is they're asking for basically the same stuff. It's like your taxes and some worksheets. Your results are then sent to the schools that you enter into the FAFSA. You can initially put in 10 different schools. You can also fill out the FAFSA first without putting any schools in it, and then later on putting schools in. You're going to want to do that because there's no point in filling out the FAFSA if the information isn't being sent anywhere. But you can go in and make that an iterative process. If you apply to more than 10 schools, put down your top 10 first, then later on when you change your mind about some, or maybe you don't get accepted to all of them, you can delete some and then add in new schools later on. You can also, after you fill out your FAFSA and get accepted to the university, that's the point at which you can reach out with any special circumstances that you're experiencing. Some universities might say, okay, great, we'll hold on to this and we'll go through the appeal process. Some universities might say, contact us in February, or contact us, whenever, because timelines are a little different based on the institution. And lastly, you can expect to get your financial aid offer from the university after you've been accepted to the university. Don't expect to get a financial aid offer before that. But after you fill out the FAFSA, you'll get your student aid report that has your expected family contribution number on it, and you can use that to type that into a net price calculator. All universities have a net price calculator, which will ask your EFC, expected family contribution, some other information like if you're in state or out of state, your adjusted gross income, things like that. And it'll tell you a really close estimate of what you can expect your financial aid offer to be even before you're accepted. This is how I like to think about the FAFSA. Like, why do we even do this, right? It's this little machine that lives in the cloud, and it sucks in the student information, the parent information, and it spits out the expected family contribution. That is the golden number. It's the whole reason that we fill out the FAFSA, expected family contribution. Do not think, again, that the EFC is what you have to pay. Rather, think of it as an index number that the federal government uses to compare financial strength of families across the country. And every institution uses that expected family contribution number a little differently. There could be some institutions, particularly private institutions, that say, yep, the EFC, that's what you have to pay, done. There are some institutions that use that expected family contribution number to see if you meet a threshold to access other financial aid. It is all different. Another way to think of it is kind of like a credit score, where that's similar. It's an index number, and every institution uses a credit score a little different, right? Another way that the expected family contribution number is important is in identifying what financial need is. Without my financial aid hat on, if I hear financial need, to me it's like, oh, that's the money that I need to go to college. That's not what it is. Financial need is the total cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution. That's your financial need. So to give a little texture around this, here are the three schools in Madison. Edgewood, private, UW-Madison, public 4-year, Madison College, 2-year school. These were last year's numbers. You'll see that in this example, it's the cost that differs. The expected family contribution remains the same across those institutions, so the financial need is variable based on the cost of attendance. So in this circumstance, there's a higher financial need for somebody going to Edgewood than someone going to Madison College, so they will likely get more financial aid offered to them from Edgewood, both because it's private and because the financial need is greater. For our visual learners in the crowd, that's another way to think about it. EFC remains the same. All right, so the expected family contribution is actually a quite complicated formula based on everything that you put in the FAFSA. Some things are weighed more heavily, some assets are protected at a certain amount based on the age of the older parent. Like, it's a little wonky, right? But the main determinants that impact the expected family contribution are the student and parent income and assets. From an expense standpoint, we're looking at the number of people in the household and the number of people in the household that attend college, excluding the parents. I want to dive a little bit deeper into what's considered an asset. You do not report retirement investments on the FAFSA. You do not report retirement investments on the FAFSA. You do not report the value of the home that you live in on the FAFSA. If you own a small business, you do not report those assets if there's less than 100 people working at that business. If you own real estate, you do claim that as an investment, the value of the real estate minus whatever debt you owe. If that real estate is housed under an LLC, you still report that as investments because rentals are never considered a small business. Still me. Yeah, good. I love this stuff. I could talk about it all night. Something to point out when you get your financial aid offers and you're looking at the overall costs, because that's the whole reason that we're talking about financial aid, right? Because college costs stuff, money. It's important to differentiate your direct expenses and your indirect costs. Direct expenses are the things that you are going to have a bill for. There will be a due date. Typically, you're billed half in the fall, half in the spring. There are consequences for not paying that bill by the due date. Everything, and usually that's tuition and fees and housing and meals if you live in the residence halls. That could differ based on institutions, but that's typically what the direct expenses are. Indirect expenses are it's the way the university is being transparent about costs that you can incur just by being a human and by being a student. But you're not going to get a direct bill for them, and it's based on your spending habits or the requirements of your classes, your major. So indirect expenses are things like books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses, so like how often are you getting new clothing, your cell phone bill, how often are you going out to the movies, when that's a thing that we do more often, stuff like that. And then loan fees, if you take out loans.
All right, my turn. So talking about financial aid and the FAFSA and EFCs and all that, cost of attendance, but more so like what are the types of aids that's available to students? And two of those types of aids are grants and scholarships. And that is the free money. That's the money that you don't have to pay back. It's free. And some of that comes from the federal government, which is administered by schools. Some of it comes from the state, so the state of Wisconsin, or whatever state you apply to. Some of that free money grants come from the institution, so the actual college that you're attending. And then there's also private scholarships and grants and stuff like that. So some examples of like federal aid would be the federal Pell Grant. So that's kind of an example for federal aid. And then, so talking about scholarships, there's some scholarships that are merit-based, and then there's some that are need-based. So they're processed differently based on the institution. So something that you would need to connect with the institution to kind of see how things work. So it's important to plan ahead, and thinking about scholarships. You don't just apply to scholarships as a high school student, a high school senior. You should be applying to scholarships every year. You always want to get that free money. Less money you have to pay out of pocket. So definitely like looking at scholarships like on the institution's website. So like at UW-Madison's, we have the Wisconsin Scholarship Hub. They make you fill out a kind of like a survey to gather like your interests and stuff like that. So you fill it out, you kind of see what populates for your interests, and then you look at those scholarships and see what the requirements are. And if like you don't meet some of the requirements for some scholarships, maybe in a year or two you can meet the requirements for that scholarship and then apply then. So that's kind of what we mean by like planning ahead, and that way you can continue to apply for scholarships every year. But it does take time, writing essays and stuff like that. A lot of students don't like to do that. They don't want to spend time on this, but if the scholarship is $1,000 and you just have to write an essay, that's the easiest $1,000 you had to make. So definitely like ask people to read your essays, and the more eyes and more people that you get to see it, can make it better. So definitely take the time to do it. It's free money. There's also some websites out there that are scams, so be careful of those. We made a list of some trusted national searches, so I think we're sending this out, so if you didn't write them down, we'll send it out.
I just want to add a little bit more texture to the merit versus need-based. There are some institutions where you are automatically looked at for merit-based scholarships just from your application information. There are some institutions where you have to apply for merit-based scholarships separately. So questions that you should be asking your institution are, well, how does merit-based funding work? Is it automatic or do I have to apply? How do I apply? And what's the timeline to apply to that?
So talking about UW-Madison specifically, we have some promise programs that we're gonna go through tonight. So the first one is Bucky's Tuition Promise. So this is a program that we have committed to Wisconsin residents. So you need to be a Wisconsin resident, either a freshman or a transfer student, and then have a family adjusted gross income of $60,000 or less. And this promise program covers tuition and fees. If you come in as a freshman, it's going to be 8 consecutive semesters, and if you come in as a transfer student, it's going to be 4 consecutive semesters.
All of these programs don't require any additional application. It's all straight from the FAFSA. If you're not interested in applying to UW-Madison, a question that you could be asking the institutions that you are interested in are, what are your financial aid programs or what are your promise programs?
Another promise program we have is the Bucky's Tuition Promise Plus, which is similar to the Bucky's tuition promise, except for this one adds for aid for additional expenses is housing and board. But you have to be a Pell Grant eligible Wisconsin resident. Again, freshman or transfer student. We meet your full financial need, which is covered for 2 years, which we talked about earlier what financial need is, which is the cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution equals your financial need. Next, we have the Badger Promise. So again, Wisconsin residents, we're kind of making big promises to our Wisconsin residents.
So many
Here.
promises. We'll keep them too.
So Wisconsin resident, being a first-generation college student, transfer from a 2-year UW college or selected liberal arts associate degree programs, and we covered free tuition and fees for up to 1 or 2 years.
So something that I just want to note is based on the Wisconsin system, you are a first-generation college student if you don't have a parent with a 4-year degree from the United States. So if you have a parent with a 2-year degree, but not a 4-year degree, you're first gen. If you have an older sibling with a 4-year degree, but your parents don't have a 4-year degree, you're first gen. If your parents have a degree from a different country, you're first gen. And if you are, you should be talking about that in your college applications and in your scholarship essays as well. And I just want to note that this is our only program that has nothing to do with financial needs specifically. You get 2 years of tuition covered if you're Pell Grant eligible. If you aren't Pell Grant eligible, you still get 1 year of tuition covered.
And then we also have a program called Fast Track. Another Wisconsin resident, incoming freshman or transfer student, financial need is met for 8 consecutive semesters. And then it's for students who receive public assistance, such as Medicaid, supplemental security income, supplemental nutrition assistance program, free reduced lunch, and such. So if you meet one of these requirements, then you could potentially become a FAFSA scholar.
And there are questions on the FAFSA about public assistance.
Another type of aid that there are loans, which is money that needs to be paid back. So this is borrowed money. So eventually we have to pay this back. So with loans, there's different types of loans. Federal Direct Loan Program. We also have the loan program for Parent Plus, institutional loans, and then private loans. We'll also talk about employment, so we're talking about federal work study, and then talking about off-campus employment as well. So when thinking about the federal direct loan programs, these loans require interest. So there are definitely, so depending on the type of loan it is, so there's subsidized and then there's unsubsidized loans. I like to think about it as subsidized. You take the first half of the year sub, and you think of it like a sub sandwich, and like you want to eat a sub sandwich, and those are good. So subsidized loans don't accrue interest while you're in school. So those are kind of like those are need-based loans. So those are kind of what I call the good loans. And then unsubsidized loans are loans that gain interest while you're in school. As soon as it's been dispersed, it starts accruing interest. The grace period for these loans are 6 months. So once your student graduates or is out of school or drops below half-time, they start their grace period. There are caps, loan limits for each year. So depending on how many credits you bring into UW-Madison or into the institution, you are eligible for a specific loan limit. The 2021 interest rates are for this upcoming school year is 3.73%, with an origination fee of 1.59%. So origination fee is kind of like the cut that is taken right off the top as that money is dispersed.
Yes, it's just the fee that the federal government charges to lend. One, I just want to add a little bit more about that 6-month grace period. It means that you do not have to start making payments on those loans, either subsidized or unsubsidized, until 6 months after your student graduates or drops below part-time. And these are the types of loans, federal direct loans, that you have access to by filling out the FAFSA. There's no additional application for these loans, and just because you'll see them on your financial aid offer does not mean that you need to take them, but you do have access to them.
And sometimes, accepting, these loans isn't enough. So some other options that you have is either a Parent Plus loan or a private loan. With a Parent Plus loan, that's a federal loan, so it's through the Department of Education, but it is through and under the parent's name. So the parent has to apply for these loans at studentaid.gov. It also has a fixed interest rate of 6%, a little more than 6%, and origination fee a little bit more than 4%.
So that's the kicker with the Parent Plus loan, honestly, is that origination fee. If you took out $10,000, the federal government will keep about $423, but you still owe $10,000. Another thing that I want to mention about the Parent Plus loan is when you're comparing financial aid offers, there are some institutions that automatically include a Parent Plus loan as part of your financial aid. So when you're looking at that net cost, the cost minus your financial aid, it's really important to pay attention to that, because just because they include the Parent Plus loan doesn't mean that you're going to apply for it, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be accepted for it. There's a light credit check on that Parent Plus loan, so be really mindful of that as you're comparing financial aid offers.
And also, when you're getting a Parent Plus loan, when it disperses, you automatically have to start paying that back, but you can ask for a deferment and until your student is out of school. The other option is private loans. So these is through a bank or a credit union. The student typically needs it's under the student's name, typically needs a cosigner. And then it's based on credit. So it's kind of your own personal choice and what works for you and your family and your circumstances.
Yeah, we can't recommend one lender over another, just legally. We do have a tool on the UW-Madison's website called Fast Choice. That's a comparison tool of different lenders that UW-Madison students have used in the past. And you'll see that there's a big range in interest rate that's listed because, again, it goes back to the cosigner's credit. That's what influences that interest rate on the private loan. All right. Another piece of the financial aid puzzle is employment. I love this little octopus. Please work, please work. Oh man, come on. Okay, this octopus is thinking very deeply about juggling those balls and many more. So sometimes we get a little pushback, especially from parents, saying, oh, I don't want my student to have an on-campus job their incoming year. I want them to take the time to acclimate to the academic rigor, to figure out the new surrounding, their new life, their new lifestyle, all that. And I totally get it. It is completely a personal choice if your student wants to work their freshman year. And there's a ton of research out there that shows that students who have an on-campus job their incoming freshman year are more likely to graduate on time and do better academically than their peers who don't have a job. And the biggest reason for that is time management. This might be the first time in your life as a student where you might have a whole half day. Shoot, you might get super lucky and have a whole day where you don't have any classes. You don't have anywhere you have to be. And it is so easy to watch that next episode on Netflix or keep playing that video game or doing your paint by numbers or whatever it is that you lose time doing than to feel the sense of urgency around out of the classroom studying. And in higher education, that out of the classroom study time is so important. So if you pop in a couple hours here and there where you have to go to your job, it really helps provide some of that time management and a little bit more of that structure and sense of urgency around using that time wisely. Also, it's a really good way to meet other folks that you wouldn't otherwise meet in your residence halls or in your classes. And hey, you can get a paycheck. That's something good, right? I think I probably shouldn't put $4 signs up there, Maybe we should knock it down to 1 or 2, right? It's not going to pay for out-of-state tuition, but it might help with some books and stuff, right? Some incidentals, earn that paycheck. When you get your student aid report, that receipt after you fill out the FAFSA, you'll see if you're eligible for something called federal work study. From the student's perspective, federal work study is just like getting any other job. You apply for the job, you work how many hours you want. Usually we see the most success with students working between 8 and 15 hours a week. You get paid whatever the wages of that job are, and it's up to you how to use that paycheck. It doesn't go directly to pay tuition. The incentive for work study, though, is on the side of the employer, because the federal government pays for half of your wages up to what you've been awarded. So employers are incentivized to hire you. At some universities, that might mean that there are some campus jobs that are only available to work study students. Also, when you fill out the FAFSA next year, it'll ask you what were your wages earned by federal work study, and that's not counted as your wages. So there are some benefits to federal work study, certainly. But if you don't have access to federal work study, don't worry about it, because there's still a lot of other jobs available to folks who don't have work study. Work study might also be available at specific institutions on top of or supplemental to federal work study. So that could be another question that you ask, particularly you see that more with private schools having their own institutional work study programs. All right, so let's say you get accepted to your top school. Yes, you celebrate, feeling good. You get your financial aid offer, and maybe you're feeling a little less good. Maybe you're looking at how much you've already saved. Maybe you're getting some scholarships, some grants, good stuff. What are some ways to fill in a gap of attendance? We have talked about most of them. The first is Parent Plus or private loans. Those are something that you can explore supplemental to what you've already been offered. If you are looking at Parent Plus or private loans, though, we do highly recommend that the student take advantage of those federal direct loans that they were offered by filling out the FAFSA, just because there's a lot of repayment safety options, safety net options with those loans, and it's the lowest interest rate, really, that you'll be able to find. Scholarships, as Molly Jo mentioned, this is not something that you should just be looking at when you're in high school. You should be exploring scholarships your entire academic career. And as freshmen, look ahead to see what scholarships are available to juniors and seniors, so you can start making decisions your freshman year about what leadership opportunities should you pursue, what student orgs should you be involved in, what kind of work do you want to do, what kind of research do you want to do, what's the GPA that you have to maintain to be competitive for those scholarships even 2 years down the road. Employment, hey, just talked about that. You can get a job, get paid, yeah, working. And there are some other financing options available as well. You can ask your institution if they offer an installment plan. So this would be for those direct costs where you have half of it due in the fall and half of it due in the spring. You might be able to enroll, usually for a dollar amount, in an installment plan that then splits up that payment over an amount of time. The rest of the things that are listed on this slide are things that exist in the world, but are outside of the purview of a financial aid office to give advice about. So if you have questions about home equity, life insurance policy, or pension plan loans, or any more in-depth questions about 529 college savings plans, please reach out to a financial advisor or a certified tax professional with those specific questions. So next steps. We only have seniors here, right? So only look at the senior part. Fill out the FAFSA. It's available now. Continue to apply for scholarships. If you don't already have a budget and a savings plan, create one. If you have questions about how to do that, feel free to reach out to our office, not only with questions about the FAFSA or budgeting, but anything related to financial aid. Even if you have no intention of applying to UW-Madison, we are here as a resource for you. And check out pre-college programming. A lot of institutions across the nation have some pre-college programming. Maybe look at over winter break, for instance, and there are some scholarships for those pre-college programs as well. And lastly, if you haven't already, start talking with your family about money. Make it very, very clear who is paying for what, who's responsible for what does this look like. your freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and into the future. I've had unfortunate conversations with students in my office before where they said, ooh, I thought my parents were gonna pay for more than they actually are. Oops, what do I do now, right? Please don't be that student. Don't let your kid be that student, right? Have those hard conversations now.
So there's multiple ways to contact us, as Carrie said. Like, even if you don't choose to attend UW-Madison, we can still be used as a resource. So there are multiple ways you can connect with us. You can call our front desk office. Follow us on our social media platforms. We post a lot of information about the FAFSA. We post tips and tricks. We post scholarships. So definitely follow us on our social media. Even follow the social media of the institutions that you want to apply for. They'll post a lot of things too, even maybe things specific to their institution. So definitely use social media. We're trying to up our game. You can also email us or stop by our office. We're open for in-person walk-ins, so definitely come see us. Do you have any questions that we can answer?
As a first-timer, rough and ready,
So as a first-timer, rough and ready, what is the time investment to fill out the FAFSA? Is this, I can do it a half an hour before I go to the movies, or it's scratch out 2 days to do it, or what do you think?
well, I guess, thank you very much.
Thanks for asking the first question. That's a tricky question to answer. I would say plan at least 40 minutes to an hour, at least. That's assuming you have all of your information together and you're able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. I'd say worst case scenario is 2 hours. And after you fill it out the first time, it's easier every year after that, just because anything is easier after you do something the first time, but also it saves a lot of your information. Another thing to note about the FAFSA is if you have 2 kids in college, when you enter in your parental information, it'll ask you if there's another student that you want to use your information for. So that is another way that it goes faster if you have multiple kids in college. We have more swag. Any other questions? I've got grocery bags, water bottles. Yes, yes.
What happens if you don't make the deadline? Is there like a grace period that you have to pay something, or like what happens if you don't make that?
The question is, what happens? This is so freaky to talk back here and hear myself. The question is, what happens if you don't meet the priority deadline? The answer would be different at every institution. I can say at UW-Madison, even if you miss the deadline, you're still going to get what you're eligible for. It just helps us with planning, budgeting, projections. Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, what kind of swag do you want?
Got a question over here.
For the assets you don't have to report, does that include farm and ag assets?
Yes, if you own a farm or live on a farm, you don't report those assets unless you have more than 100 employees on that farm. For the parents in the audience, if you have younger students, in 2 years, there's a lot of things changing with the FAFSA. So if you have younger students, come back to this presentation in 2 years. Thought I saw an arm over here. Yeah. The question is, what if parents don't live in the United States, don't have U.S. income? There is a way to answer that question, saying that my parents don't live, you can just answer, my parents don't live in the United States, and you'll say either if they have employment out of the country, and if that employment, like if that country has taxes or not. Likely that student will be flagged for the verification process, where then they'd have to provide the documentation and do the money conversion. So yeah. You're welcome. What kind of swag? You want swag? Yeah. What other questions do you have? And we'll be in the back too if you have specific questions to your circumstances. It's a nice grocery bag. All right, pals, thank you so very much. Thank you to Molly Jo for joining tonight as well. Thank you for the invitation. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Carrie and Molly Jo. And if anyone else has any additional questions for us school counselors here, we are going to remain in the front too. Please don't hesitate, come on down. But thank you all so much for coming this evening. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email or phone as well.